Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 15, Special Senses.
The eyes and vision, external and accessory structures. Your eyelids protect your eyeballs. Projecting from the border of each eyelid are your eyelashes. Modified sebaceous glands associated with the eyelid edges are the tarsal glands. These glands produce an oily secretion that lubricates the eye. Ciliary glands, modified sweat glands, lie between the eyelashes. Conjunctiva is a delicate membrane. It lines the eyelids and covers part of the outer surface of the eyeball. Lacrimal apparatus. The lacrimal apparatus consists of the lacrimal gland and a number of ducts that drain the lacrimal secretions into the nasal cavity. The lacrimal glands are located in the lateral end of each eye. They continually release a salt solution, which is tears, onto the anterior surface of the eyeball through several small ducts. Lacrimal caniculi. The tears flush across the eyeball into the lacrimal caliculi, medially, into the lacrimal sac, and finally, the nasolacrimal duct, which empties into the nasal cavity. Lysozyme. It's a lacrimal secretion that contains antibodies and lysosome, an enzyme that destroys bacteria. Thus, it cleanses and protects the eye surface as it moistens and lubricates it. 6 extrinsic or external eye muscles are attached to the outer surface of the eye. These muscles produce gross eye movements and make it possible for the eyes to follow the moving object. Internal structures of the eyeball. The fibrous layer is the outermost layer, and it consists of the protective sclera and the transparent cornea. The sclera is a thick, glistening white connective tissue, also called the white of the eye. The cornea is the central anterior portion of the fibrous layer. It's crystal clear. This is the window through which light enters the eye. The vascular layer is the middle layer, and it has 3 regions: the choroid, ciliary body, and the iris. The choroid is most posterior. It's a blood-rich, nutritive tunic that contains a dark pigment. The pigment prevents light from scattering inside the eye. The ciliary body is most anteriorly. The pigmented iris has a round opening, which is called a pupil, through which light passes through. The innermost sensory layer of the eye is the delicate 2-layered retina, which extends anteriorly onto the ciliary body. The pigmented layer of the retina is composed of pigmented cells that, like the choroid, absorbs light and prevents light from scattering inside the eye. The neural layer is a transparent inner layer of the retina and contains millions of receptor cells, rods and cones, which are called photoreceptors because they respond to light. The 2-neuron chain. Electrical signals pass from the photoreceptors via a 2-neuron chain, bipolar cells, and then ganglion cells, before leaving the retina via optic nerve as nerve impulses that are transmitted to the optic cortex. The result is vision. Optic disc. The photoreceptor cells are distributed over the entire retina except where the optic nerve leaves the eyeball. The site is called the optic disc or blind spot. Fovea centralis. Lateral to each blind spot is the fovea centralis, a tiny pit that contains only cones. The lens. Light entering the eye is focused on the retina by the lens, a flexible biconvex crystal-like structure. Chambers. The lens divides the eye into 2 segments or chambers. The anterior or aqueous segment is anterior to the lens and contains a clear watery fluid called aqueous humor. The posterior or vitreous segment is posterior to the lens and filled with a gel-like substance called either vitreous humor or the vitreous body. Vitreous humor helps prevent the eyeball from collapsing inward by reinforcing it internally. The aqueous humor is similar to blood plasma and is continually secreted by a special of the choroid. It helps maintain intraocular pressure or the pressure inside the eye. Canal of Schillem. Aqueous humor is reabsorbed into the venous blood through the scleral venous sinus, which is located in the junction of the sclera and the cornea. Eye reflexes. Both the external and internal eye muscles are necessary for proper eye function. Photopupillary reflex. So when the eyes are suddenly exposed to bright light, the pupils immediately constrict. This protective reflex prevents excessive bright light from damaging the delicate photoreceptors. Accommodation pupillary reflex is the pupils also constrict reflexively when we view close objects. It provides for more acute vision. The ear, hearing and balance. Anatomy of the ear. The ear is divided into three major areas: the external or outer ear, the middle, and the internal or inner ear. The external or outer ear is composed of the arcuole and the external acoustic meatus. The arcuole, or pinna, is what most people call the ear, the shell-shaped structure surrounding the auditory canal opening. The external acoustic meatus is a short, narrow chamber carved into the temporal bone of the skull. In its skin-lined walls are the glands to which you can find earwax, which provides a sticky trap for foreign bodies and repels insects. The tympanic membrane. Sound waves entering the auditory canal eventually hit the tympanic membrane or eardrum and cause it to vibrate. The canal ends at the eardrum, which separates the external from the middle ear. The middle ear, or tympanic cavity, is a small air-filled, mucus-lined cavity within the temporal bone. The internal ear is mazed by bony chambers called the bony or osseous, located deep within the temporal bone behind the eye socket. Subdivisions. There are three subdivisions of the bony labyrinth are the spiraling piece-sized cochlea, the vestibule, and the semicircular canals. Chemical senses: taste and smell. The receptors for taste and olfaction are classified as chemoreceptors because they respond to chemicals in solution. Olfactory receptors and the sense of smell. Olfactory receptors are thousands of receptors for the sense of smell that occupy a postage stamp-sized area in the roof of each nasal cavity. The olfactory receptor cells are neurons equipped with olfactory hairs, which are long cilia that protrude from the nasal epithelium and are continuously bathed by a layer of mucus secreting by underlying glands. Olfactory filaments. When the olfactory receptors located on the cilia are stimulated by chemicals dissolved in the mucus, they transmit impulses along the olfactory filaments, which are bundled axons of olfactory neurons that collectively make up the olfactory nerve. Olfactory nerve conducts the impulses of the olfactory cortex of the brain. Taste buds and the sense of taste. The taste buds, or specific receptors for the sense of taste, are widely scattered in the oral cavity. Of the 10,000 or so taste buds we have, most are on the tongue. Papillae. The dorsal tongue surface is covered in small peg-like projections, papillae. Gustatory cells. The specific cells that respond to chemicals dissolved in the saliva are epithelial cells. Gustatory hairs. Their long microvilli, the gustatory hairs, protrude through the taste pore when they are stimulated. They depolarize and impulses are transmitted to the brain. Facial nerve, number 7, serves the anterior part of the tongue. Glossopharyngeal and vagus nerves. The other two cranial nerves, the glossopharyngeal and vagus, serve the other taste bud containing areas. Basal cells. Taste bud cells are among the most dynamic cells in the body. They are replaced every 7 to 10 days by basal cells found in deeper regions of the taste buds. Physiology of the special senses. Pathway of light through the eye and light refraction. Refraction. The refractive or bending power of the cornea and the humors is constant. However, that of the lens can be changed by changing its shape. That is, by making it more or less convex so that light can be properly focused on the retina. Lens. The greater the lens convexity or bulge, the more it bends the light. The flatter the lens, the less it bends the light. Resting eye. The resting eye is set for distance vision. In general, light from a distant source approaches the eye as parallel rays, and the lens does not need to change shape or focus properly on the retina. Light divergence. Light from a close object tends to scatter and to diverge or spread out, and the lens must bulge more to make close vision possible. To achieve this, the ciliary body contracts, allowing the lens to become more convex. Accommodation, the ability of the eye to focus specifically for close objects. Real image, the image formed on the retina as a result of the light bending activity of the lens is a real image. That is, it is reversed from left to right, upside down, and smaller than the object. Visual fields and visual pathways to the brain. Axon-carrying impulses from the retina are bundled together at the posterior aspect of the eyeball and issue from the back of the eye as the optic nerve. Mechanisms of equilibrium. The equilibrium receptors of the inner ear, collectively called the vestibular apparatus, can be divided into two functional arms. One arm responsible for monitoring static equilibrium, and the other involved with dynamic equilibrium. Within the membrane sacs of the vestibule are receptors called maculae that are essential to our sense of static equilibrium. The dynamic equilibrium receptors found in the semicircular canals respond to angular or rotary movements of the head rather than straight line movements. Mechanism of hearing. The following is the route of sound waves through the ear and activation of the cochlear hair cells. Through vibrations, sound transmission, low-frequency sound waves, high-frequency sound waves, and the length of fibers.